Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Ena mana, ena reo, ena karangatanga maha, tena koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. Kia kato katoa, tena koutou, tena tātou katoa. So kia ora everybody, and welcome to our very first Inbound Insiders webinar with General Travel. My name's Anna Black, I'm Executive Director, and you've also got John Singh on the screen, who's our Managing Director and Big Boss. Also joining us and assisting with the technical side of things just off screen to my right is Annette Nichols, our Product and Contracting Manager, and tuning in, my dad. Welcome to our guest panelists today also, who I'll introduce in a moment. And finally, welcome to all our tourism friends and whānau from around the country who've tuned in. As most of you will know, General Travel, we are an inbound tour operator. We've been in business for 47 years, since 1973 when Peter Black started the business, and we're still privately owned and operated. We work in all markets around the world and all types of traveller, from FIT to groups, small and large, MICE, special interest, as well as some cruise land operations. We work in all levels of product from 3-star through to luxury and beyond, and we are a DMC providing full service with packaged products for our offshore clients to sell. Kiwiway Vacations is our FIT branded product, and we've actually got a new website and product launch coming shortly, so we'll keep you all informed and involved in that as well. But that's a refresh of Kiwiway for our international visitors post-COVID. So over to you now, John.
Oh, that's fast. Well, kia ora, everyone. Well, to anyone who doesn't know me still, I'm the little general working in General Travel. Now, I'd like to start off by sharing with you one thing in life that I encounter regularly, and that is, in life, knowing is easy, but to put what you might already knew into action is totally a different ballgame altogether. With this, COVID-19 has posed grave challenges for our industry, the impact of which will be felt for years to come. During this time, while recovery is a priority for us all, this period must also force us to reconsider how travel re-emerges and the shape it should take in the future. Without any doubt, every one of us believe that the travel will return, and that it will flourish as well. But the million-dollar question is when? And when it happens, it will fundamentally be different. As an inbound operators in this industry, it is critical that we address several areas as we plan and begin to rebuild what is one of the world's largest and most influential economies. In this webinar, we will share with you an insight into what we at General Travel are currently doing and why. And we will also explore what the international markets are doing and their expectation of us all. And here, you will hear more from our overseas insider, which is, as what Anna has mentioned, our two overseas-based Kiwi colleagues, which is Stephen and Aaron. Now, thanks to every one of you for taking time in joining us today. I will now hand over the rest of the worst part of this webinar to Anna Black, my partner in crime, in all my dealing with you all. Kia kaha. All yours, Anna.
Thanks, John. Well, today's, just quickly some housekeeping for today's session. We're planning for this to be informal, informative, but relaxed, and those who logged in early will see how we were just chatting away. But if you've got any questions, please write them in the Q&A, and Annette's going to let me know when we've got some questions. Today, we've got 4 extremely experienced and knowledgeable specialists on our panel today. We're so fortunate to have these guys with us, and thank you so much. First of all, Aaron Gilden is Air New Zealand Sales Manager for Southeast Asia and UK Europe, based in Singapore. As well as leading the business strategy within the region, Aaron also manages the stakeholder engagement for the JV with Singapore Airlines, as well as interfacing with commercially contracted trade accounts. So welcome, Aaron. Stephen Dixon is Tourism New Zealand's Regional Trade Marketing Manager for Asia and is also based in Singapore. Stephen's core role is to develop trade marketing strategies to deliver strong business outcomes across the leisure trade, business events, and luxury sectors. Stephen's also responsible for the stakeholder relations with airlines, government departments, and organisations. So welcome, Stephen. Karen Numbia is Business Development Director for Destination Queenstown, and has fulfilled his dream of moving to New Zealand, now living the Kiwi dream in Queenstown. But for those of us who have worked in the India market for many years, Karan's known to many as Mr. Kiwi Link India, running the TNZ office in Mumbai for a number of years, and then as Regional Manager Southeast Asia for TNZ. And last but certainly not least is Michelle Caldwell, our tourism strategist. Michelle's worked in the tourism industry for almost 2 decades and in many areas of tourism, managing inbound and wholesale tour operations, sales, marketing roles, before starting her own business called Destinate NZ, working with small and medium tourism businesses to rebuild their business strategies, refocus on domestic, we don't say pivot, and preparing for the border reopening. So Michelle currently has her own weekly tourism podcast and has a wide experience and knowledge of this complex industry. So thank you guys all for joining us. Just before we get into some Q&A with our panelists, I just want to give you a quick update on general travel, what we're doing and how we're planning for the future from an inbounder's point of view. So as a nearly 5-decade-old business, we thought we'd been there, done that with all these challenges and crises thrown at us over the years. But each time we just pick ourselves up and we adjust our strategy, and this time is no different. We've downsized our team, renegotiated all our costs, and hunkered down to ride this out, as many of you have done as well, we know. We're extremely busy initially with cancellations and refunds for last season and for the winter. And now we're busy with forward bookings for the 21-22 season, the 22-23 season, and we expect to start receiving requests for the 23-24 season by March 2021. So we're in constant contact with our clients offshore, as well as our remaining offshore general travel staff members. And our clients offshore, for those who may not be aware, are the offshore wholesalers in each market, as well as owner-operated travel agents in each market. We're also in constant contact with our supply partners to contract the 21-22 season and beyond, as well as update and adjust where products or tours have changed due to COVID. So our theme for today is the chicken and egg. And here's why. What are the challenges we are currently facing? Firstly, we need forward rates so we can quote and keep our clients interested in New Zealand. We know this is tricky in the current economic climate and each business's survival mode. We know you have to bear in mind domestic versus international pricing. This is the chicken and egg scenario. But we ask that every supplier partner, please remember the reach of the internet, that most international clients will see your domestic deals online and will query us on all pricing when we open our borders. And it's going to get very competitive very fast. For activities, we need rates now for the 21-22 summer season if you haven't already issued them. And we have to be able to quote for that season right now. For accommodation, we need rates through to March 2023 so we can forward promotion, book your products and quote your products. Around 95% of our supplier partners have either rolled over their rates for the 21-22 season or even reduced their rates. So the thorn in the ointment are the few who are not able to release their rates because they don't know what's going to happen in the future. The reality is no one knows what the future holds. We need you guys to stick your neck out a little bit and plan ahead, even though naturally the main focus is obviously to focus on the here and now. We have to remember our offshore clients are selling the world, and if little old New Zealand makes it too difficult for them to give their clients what they're asking for with their post-COVID travel, they will advise them to choose another destination. Secondly is placing bookings if we don't know when the borders are going to be opening. Essentially, we need to keep New Zealand front and centre of our clients' minds, and so we won't say no to booking requests for 2021, even if we don't think that market will be open. But as your ITO and middle person for supplier products, we help manage your product inventory so that you're not holding unnecessary or ghost bookings in your system. We talk and communicate, and we're the middle person between you guys and our client, and make sure that you are protected as well as our offshore clients are protected. So John had a nice little saying before. He's got another one he's given me. Peace of mind is now a commodity. So restoring confidence will be achieved by de-risking the entire decision-making process from planning through to experience, and providing travellers with tools and information necessary when the change arises. So things like cancellation and amendment policies, deposits and prepayments. Consumers are nervous, as are suppliers, around payment. Requiring deposits and early payment will not secure the bookings, and the clients will look to other suppliers for more flexibility, or if we as New Zealand Inc. make it too hard, they'll look to another destination. So consumers are expecting more, not less, flexibility after COVID or during COVID, because we're going to have to live with this. So those who are able to work out a workable flexibility between what the consumer client wants and what you can do in your business, they'll be the winners. Commission structure and distribution chain. In all honesty, this is not one of the areas of tourism we need to reimagine. If it works well, and it works for all parts of the distribution chain. In the wholesale world, OTAs or online travel agents have been a disruptor, but not a disruptor in the inbound world. There are many clients, especially as we move into post-COVID, who want someone to plan their holiday. They're happy to pay a fee for this, and they want to get the best quality, the best pricing, and the best products. OTAs are an aggregate seller with none of that extra service included. So some clients are more than happy with this. But again, we say we need our supplier partners to be aware of what an OTA versus an ITO offers in terms of client management, service delivery, promotion of your products, promotion of New Zealand year-round, promotion of the regions, and the manaki of our customers and our supplier partners. So just to finish, what we're doing with our clients offshore, we're quoting on demand for periods even when we know the borders are likely not to be open, but we're wanting to maintain interest in New Zealand, and hopefully clients are hooked and rebook. So let me move now to Stephen. Stephen, how are you doing in Singapore? Give us a bit of an update on how you and the team are.
Good, thanks. Kia ora. Good afternoon, New Zealand. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So for those who haven't met me, I'm Stephen Dixon, the Regional Trade Marketing Manager, Asia, based here in Singapore. And I thought I would just, first of all, acknowledge the challenging times that everyone's going through at the moment, to thank you all for tuning in. I can't see your faces, but I can see that there's certainly many familiar names that have joined in today. And also just want to thank everyone for the support that you have shown the offshore markets during sort of recent times. I know I'm not allowed to use the term PIVOT or even swivel, but I know that a lot of your focus obviously has been on the domestic market, but at the same time, you've been really, really generous in the support that you've shown the offshore markets in our activity, both with the consumer and the travel agents. And I think it's landed really, really well with our audience. And I think it's a really strong testament to, I guess, to the deep kind of rooted relationships that the New Zealand industry has with Asia. So thank you very much for that one. Look, our team across Asia, and when I talk about Asia, I'm talking about the 7 markets within the portfolio that I look after, which is Singapore, Malaysia, India, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, and Korea. And we've got obviously teams across those key markets. We service Malaysia, Philippines, remotely here from Singapore. And look, the teams are doing well. You know, it's been a challenging year for everyone, obviously. We continue to work remotely for the most part. All of our offices are working from home, have been since February, March, actually January here in Singapore, when we decided to test our flexible working program, which, albeit looking back now, is probably a couple of months too early. But the teams are doing well. they are in constant contact, obviously, with each other. What they do miss and what they have told me, the Nihas, the Naokis, the Hejongs, the Anis, Palings, and the Teresas, it's probably less the market visits from their boss, like me, but it's actually the market visits from New Zealand. As you know, they're hugely passionate about New Zealand, but hugely passionate about the audience that they service. And they really miss that face-to-face interaction with the agents, but also with the New Zealand industry. So again, thank you for remaining connected with us. And connection and connectivity and communication has been sort of paramount and the forefront of what our teams have been doing, despite working remotely. So for us, it's about keeping our audience engaged, keeping the travel agents engaged, growing destination brand New Zealand, building their capability, and then also preparing ourselves for when the borders do open, that we're in a position to sell New Zealand more effectively, I guess, than what we could before. And, you know, I think I probably will have an opportunity to go into some of the types of work that we're doing. But, you know, the landscape across our different markets continues to be quite different and quite challenging by market. For the most part, all agents are still working remotely or on furlough or on unpaid leave in many of our markets. And I might talk later about the sort of the levels of engagement, but what we are seeing is that they are incredibly engaged with New Zealand. Again, that talks back to the relationship that we have as an industry. So I'll hand that back to you now, Anna.
And I know, you know, as our Facebook feeds have come up throughout the year, it's like, oh, we would have been in India. Oh, we would, you know, this is a year ago, we're in Singapore, and it's been really nostalgic for the tourism industry not to be traveling. It's been a tough year. That's good to hear they're all coping well. Yeah, we all miss you guys as well. So please pass on our best to everybody up there. Look, I think there's a general feeling, Stephen, that we've got this unique opportunity of how well New Zealand has handled COVID and the recovery, and that, you know, New Zealand is always, you know, we say we're not a cheap destination, that we're a premium destination, but we've got this attraction in the past of people coming, and I think that's still going to be there post-COVID. What are your thoughts around that, and what are you hearing in market from the wholesalers on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's no question that what New Zealand has traditionally been famous for in terms of our open spaces, our safety, our warm, welcoming people, manaakitanga, you know, that the equity in that brand has certainly gone up. And we're certainly seeing that in some of the consumer research that we see at the moment, but also in terms of the work that we're doing with our agents, some of the results that we have from our global campaigns around brand. So we've launched the Messages from New Zealand campaign, and that really talks to those values. I think from a trade marketing standpoint, an example of that equity that we can see are the number of agents, as I said, that are effectively still not working, but who are tuning into the work that we are doing as an industry. So we've had the opportunity to actually engage with more agents across Asia than we did pre-COVID. So we've trained over 10,000 agents. The engagement levels through our sort of closed social communities has actually increased. So we've got better reach, we've got better engagement. And it's not that we have changed the way that we have operated. We've always been dealing in the digital space. It's just kind of accelerated. And certainly the sentiment, both from the consumer and the agent, is very, very positive towards New Zealand. Okay, but there are some areas that we need to really, really focus on, and we can't just rely on having that really strong brand. We have to be sure that we're ready as an industry to welcome international visitors at a time when they return to New Zealand. So a piece of work that we're doing at the moment is not just around building brand and driving brand love and inspiration and desire and intent and preference for New Zealand, but it's also preparing ourselves for demand or tactical activity. So we're working really closely to ensure that we've got the right partners in place, that we've got the right content in place, that the mood of the nation in New Zealand is ready to welcome international visitors, that the travel warnings are not there. And there's all of those sort of different criteria that we're monitoring. But certainly the relationship that the agents are showing at the moment towards New Zealand is incredibly positive. But they also want to know in New Zealand what product is there, who's hibernating, who's not, and what sort of 2021 might look like.
Yeah, and we're getting those questions all the time. And then, what's your COVID plan? Is there 50% seating on coaches and all this sort of stuff, which is kind of the norm in the rest of the world. And the challenge then is, with our little bubble in New Zealand, we're sort of waiting at the right time to give that information out to all our wholesalers, because it's constantly changing. And whether, when our PM does open up our borders, is there going to be a whole heap of further restrictions or procedures or implementations around travel that we need to start looking at?
I think just on that one, and I think what we saw recently here in Singapore after speaking with some of our key agents here was that they had about a month's notice for the Hong Kong border when that opened. So there was a fair bit of scrambling that happened. So we want to preempt that as an industry. We want to work with our partners to have, essentially two folders. One that talks about, how we will execute our plans, and the other one is timing. So I think that's really important that we preempt it now and start those conversations.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And the golden opportunity to get things right. We may not like the reimagining tourism moniker, because generally, as I say, I think the trade does it pretty well. There's other bits that can change, but being ready, I totally agree. And the hibernated businesses, those who are still there, personnel changes, the company name may still be there, but the people are not there anymore, or the contacts. So that's all a huge part of just remaining engaged. Yeah, good stuff. And can I ask, without you, knowing that you work for Tourism New Zealand, your thoughts on Minister Nash's comments about high value clients? And
okay, so I mean, look, I expected that question to come up. Perhaps not from you, Anna, but that's okay.
Well, we've got our thoughts. It's, I think it's a definition thing that needs to be addressed, rather than just a general statement.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, I think, look, probably the minister, I guess, like we do, wants to ensure that tourism probably gives back more than we take out, right? And that we give back more to New Zealand, to our homes, to our communities, and so that future generations can have a better future than what we currently have now. And we want to have visitors, domestic, international, I guess, that have a great experience in New Zealand and look after our home. And I think that that was reflected probably in some of his recent sort of follow-up communications, when he talked about the fact that budget travellers are welcome, that backpackers are welcome, and that camper vans are welcome, but just as long as they kind of don't damage our brand, NZ. So I sort of respect his follow-up comments for that one as well. But I think you're right around definition.
Well, and the industry's struggled to define it for years as well, haven't we? So we need to do that from our side.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So have we got any questions for Stephen at the moment? No? Okay, you're off the hook.
Wow.
For now.
For now. Okay, cool.
Cool, thank you. So let me move on to Aaron now. How are you doing? And,
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me along.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. I know it's early in Singapore for you guys. But
it's almost 9 o'clock, Anna. What are you telling us?
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. How's your team doing? You had some new stuff coming just in at COVID, and
it's been a really kind of challenging period for everyone, and but we've tried to navigate this as best as we could with no template to kind of work across. And there's a few of us still here, but we're definitely bruised.
But, like everyone.
What can we do?
Yeah. So Aaron, do you want to provide us an overview of Air New Zealand's current position and plans, if you can, what you can tell us?
Well, we're very much in a holding pattern like everybody, but if I review the historical and mapped future scenarios, the Air New Zealand Singapore Airlines joint venture is paramount to Air New Zealand's continued success within South and Southeast Asia and the European markets. We have realized that moving forward out of this current environment, we need to take a more collaborative and strategic approach with our market partners in both air and land, as opposed to being probably focused more on the air side and not really probably too interested in what they did once we delivered these people into New Zealand. You know, like every business, we've had to make some really hard decisions around the regional structure, resource level, and our property infrastructure. I mean, we still have the office in Singapore, and we have which has been retained, and we have 3 of us still in market working across the sales and marketing functions. But unfortunately, everybody else at this time has either been stood down or released. Part of the work that the team that are still here have been doing is around activities to ensure we've been keeping Destination New Zealand at front of mind for, you know, all of our trade partners. You know, we need to make the most of the opportunities as and when the market recovers, and it's the same stuff that everybody's been talking about and thinking about, right? And I know that yourself and John and I have, you know, constantly been having discussions around what that looks like, and no one really knows. But from an investment perspective, we've reinforced our commitment by scaling back but not abandoning any B2C or brand investment into the region. So, you know, we definitely want to make sure that people are still aware that, you know, Air New Zealand is here, and we're ready to fly them as soon as we're able to do so. And of course, like we've already spoken about this morning, you know, the globally recognized success of New Zealand's COVID management has been really well reported in Singapore and the ASEAN region. You know, there are regular articles in all the publications reporting on this. So this awareness has opened, you know, renewed interest in travel to New Zealand. And Air New Zealand positions itself as the only airline that truly knows New Zealand. So we are working through plans to develop and capture as much of that pent-up demand with our existing and opening new trade partners on their future programs to New Zealand. But I guess if I summarize exactly what we're kind of doing, we're really kind of using this time to really think deep and step change our partnerships and the way that we've been managing them.
Awesome. So you'd obviously be in touch, you know, albeit often remotely, but with your clients and the wholesalers in the market as well, and those partners for those trade partners. So what's their optimism like, and what are they saying about New Zealand?
Are very optimistic. You know, they want to get going. If I think about it, it has tapered off. I have to be completely upfront. You know, at the beginning, you know, because we weren't sure how long, you know, we were going to be navigating this kind of standstill, sort of paused period. You know, so they were very engaged, wanting to take their blocks, you know, for GIT and things for next year. But as it's kind of navigated on, you know, they have probably, you know, taken a step back from talking to us around, you know, what they want to do with that. And also it got to a point where, you know, we didn't want to keep kind of portraying a bit of a negative message around, because we weren't sure when inventory would be open for sale, because we're actually off sale completely at the moment for until 30th of March. And then obviously
because for a long time there you were just for a long time there you were rolling month by month and just moving forward, weren't you, as we were all trying to work out how long this would go for.
But then to try and give us some sort of stability around those booking flows, we had to kind of make that decision that we needed to kind of put a line in the sand. So we made that March, and then we will obviously need to review that as we go through. Our alliance partner, Singapore Airlines, they are still definitely, you know, well, they were last time I caught up with them, taking GIT blocks, just on the you know, hope that obviously as soon as things open that they've got, you know, that kind of baseline passenger count there already. But we haven't decided to do that as yet. And that's all the traditional wholesalers that we all know and love. There's no one new popping up yet. No, not I mean, definitely interest. So, and people, and there are new guys that are reaching out to us that we haven't engaged or heard of before, but which is good, right? Because then you start to see some new opportunity come through, and that's around special interest groups. So the people that are kind of working in the niche markets, be that golf, you know, sailing, that sort of thing. It's not volume, but it's definitely you know, it's all got to start somewhere, right? So
totally.
You know, it's good to kind of hear those guys and to understand that their client base or whatever segmentation that they work in is actually also still thinking about New Zealand and getting down there.
Cool. And you know, we discussed about the safe record with Stephen just now, and the perception of New Zealand. You guys are seeing that as well?
Oh, absolutely. You know, an example of how entrenched hygiene protocol has become in Singaporeans every day is up here we have this thing called the SG Clean, and it's a campaign. I mean, it's a government-led initiative that allows branding to be displayed that the establishment practices good hygiene habits. It gives people a sense of security, and you can now see the SG Clean branding everywhere, from restaurants, shops, and attractions to your local hawker centres. You know, so it's the fact that, you know, New Zealand has kind of been portrayed as this kind of standout, you know, country in this, you know, COVID world.
Yes.
It's definitely, you know, it's definitely there to be benefited from.
Yeah, totally. And just while I'm online with my other hat on as the tech chair, I might just do a shameless plug for the tourism checklist, trade checklist that we've got coming in, because it's just been launched this week, and tech and non-tech members can sign up, but essentially it's a one place to put your COVID ready plans, your insurance certificates, your health and safety plans. If you're an adventure or a water or a marine or an air operator, you know, all the different things you need for that is going to be in there. So that's going to be essential for us inbound tour operators moving forward, and feeding that through to our wholesalers who want that certainty, like you say, of how the cleanliness and how the protocols are going. Cool.
I mean, like it.
Thanks, Aaron. I have got a couple of questions. Oh.
No, please.
Sorry.
No, please ask questions.
Yeah, I've got a question here from Richard Dodds. What is travel going to look like, at least initially, and what market segments do you think will come first?
Great question. I mean, like everyone, we've done modelling around
our almost as bad as when will the borders open.
I know, right? But we've done modelling around our post-pandemic recovery. Some aspects of this are around the customer segmentation and what that timeline of each will look like to recover. For example, will customers, you know, be willing to travel with strangers or people outside of their networks and bubbles? And we've had discussion with partners around their thoughts and what this might look like from their program sort of development. You know, it's expected people will be very cautious of a world that can shut at a moment's notice, and they will require more certainty around flexibility from their holiday purchase. You know, just this weekend, we thought Sunday was going to be the launch of the Singapore-Hong Kong bubble, and it burst before it even started. You know, that then leads us to reevaluating the air product that is needed to entice these new behaviours. You know, and Air New Zealand really clearly understands that land sells air. So we are engaging the trade, you know, that, you know, whenever we're engaging them, there has always been a focus on itinerary content, and this will only increase as a focal point in our in-market engagements. And it will be particularly important, like you've already mentioned, especially if the market is noisy and many countries open at a similar time and pace together. So, so yeah, that's kind of, it's.
Yeah.
I wish I had the answers to all that.
I know. We do too. Thanks, Aaron. Awesome. Well, I've got another couple of questions I'll come back to for everyone at the end, but move on to Kiran now. How are you guys doing in Queenstown, Kiran? How are you doing?
Yeah, okay. I think it's all about perspective. So if you go back to what we expected to happen, if you go back to like May and think about what we expected to happen coming now into November, things are not as bad as we expected. But still, for Queenstown as a region, 70% of our total visitors annually are from international markets, which is quite significant. You will see media reporting in New Zealand about how Queenstown's doing quite well with growth in domestic visitors, which is true. We probably had like a 43% growth in the first school holidays over winter, about 27% growth in the second school holidays over spring. But those kind of growth within a market that's only 30% doesn't really make up for the shortfall that we see from international markets. So 70% of the market is gone. If the 30% grows by even like double-digit percentage, like it still doesn't help us. So we are going through quite a difficult period. Way back in, like usually we write our business plan for Destination Queenstown around February, March. This is, you know, the word unprecedented has been used unprecedentedly this year, but this is definitely the first year that DQ had to write 3 versions of the business plan, even before June. So between February and June, we already had like 3 versions of the plan. There is that obvious adaptation to the domestic market. So we're doing everything that we can to push the domestic market so that our activities, attractions, accommodations, retail, bars and restaurants can like get through these difficult times. We have seen growth, but it doesn't compensate for what's lost with international markets. Apart from moving into that domestic environment, for the first time, DQ as an RTO published 2 like data insights to help our operators. Way back in May, we put out like a framework about how we think the markets are going to open up. When we think the trans-Tasman bubble will start, from a conservative perspective to a like a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, when we think the other long haul markets will open. And based on that, we plotted a graph about how we see demand coming back into the Queenstown Lakes region. Essentially, that framework was kind of a guide for our businesses to take decisions about manpower or supply, or how they renegotiate their contracts, or how they go back to the bank to talk about cash flow management. So that was a useful piece of exercise that we've not done in the past. And then more recently, we've started publishing like a 90-day forward outlook of how accommodation in Queenstown looks at the moment. So this is pretty much like occupancy rates. So we're combining the information we get from commercial accommodation, which are hotels, and non-commercial accommodation, which is Airbnb and VRBO, to say, okay, the next 90 days, this is the kind of demand that we're seeing in town, based on which, again, our businesses can take decisions about, how many jet boats do they want to run, what days do they want to operate, if it's restaurants, what days they want to keep open. It's also a bit reassuring to see that there is some demand that's coming up consistently on weekends. We did get to about 70% occupancy, I think, through the last weekend, which was Queenstown Marathon. And then going forward, we've got a bit of a pickup for New Year's Eve. And then for the Gippsland concert, that's in, I think, 3rd week of January. And then later in that Waitangi weekend, we're seeing a bit of a pickup. So that probably like summarizes what's happening here is that the international markets are gone. That's 70%. There is growth in domestic, which is good news, but doesn't make up for the loss that we're feeling.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking back as you're talking about what Greg Foran said last week at the TIA Summit, and you've got 3 plans. Well done. It sounds like Air New Zealand had about 12 plans from, the worst, I won't use the words he used, through to the best. And that you shared with me those stats about the occupancy, because I also have been thinking, from an inbound point of view, we are busy planning ahead, and we've been able to, or we've had to, unfortunately, reduce our staff. But for our supplier partners, that information that you're providing for your region of when the peaks are and when they need to up staff potentially, versus days that they may be able to be closed and may be able to save on some costs. It's a tricky thing to try and balance, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the chart we were talking about.
Yes, it's pretty tricky, but like I said, this is some sort of a guidance. This also highlights the loss that we've seen from the international markets. Usually the marathon weekend would be at like over 90% occupancy. I mean, Anna, like you're a leading inbound operator, how difficult it is to get rooms.
We always, our overseas always want to come on marathon weekend to Queenstown, and they're not running the marathon.
Yeah, life is a spectator sport. And similarly through December, January and February, right? We're used to really high occupancies, but here we're like down to 20% for most of the weekdays. The domestic market is a late booking market as well. So we see that I think about half of the business is coming through in the last 7 days. There is a bit of a pickup. Like these dots that you see shows the level of the business 2 weeks back and how much more business has come up in the last 14 days. So this is a start, but this, I think, this 90 days over summer pretty much highlights how badly Queenstown is doing from a accommodation perspective.
Yeah. And then that basic fact that a domestic doesn't spend nearly as much as an international tourist. It's a good
That's a very good point as well. Very good point. you raised, Anna, because we had our QCB members update. So for DQ CNI sector, we had the members update on Thursday. And when you look at the total number of leads of business events, that is the number of leads that Destination Queenstown's generated for the last quarter, which was July, August, September, there was a drop in the number of leads, but it was like a 23% drop. So not the same quarter last year, we had some amount of leads. This year, in this quarter, we are down 23% in terms of the total number of events. But when you break that down into the number of delegates or the value, it's that minus 23% goes down to minus 70%. So in terms of delegates, it's minus 70% because the domestic groups don't have as many delegates. And then when you look at spend as a result, is minus 70% because the domestic delegates don't spend as much as international visitation.
Yeah. We've just got a question here for you, Karan. What lead time pickup are you seeing for domestic travellers in Queenstown?
I think this is probably the best way to explain it. We released this chart for the first time in the last week of October. So this was for the period starting 1st November. And then we did a refresh on Friday the 13th for 14th onwards. So this is the kind of pickup that we've seen in the last 14 days.
Oh, from the yellow dot up, that's the pickup.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So broadly,
quite last minute.
Yes, apparently our visitors up in Auckland, on a Monday or a Tuesday, look at the weather in Queenstown and decide whether they want to come down on a weekend, and they just book airfares and book accommodation, and you're here that weekend. So that's how.
Wow.
That's how we are. Like Queenstown is now weather dependent.
And I guess, Aaron, Air New Zealand seeing that as well from the domestic bookings of that Auckland propensity to
very much so. And domestic for us has always been a very kind of short booking window, especially from the domestic market. It's how, I guess, the psyche of how people procure their airfare. So, but we've been pleasantly surprised about, the domestic network and how, it's rebounded to the level that it has.
Yes. John, I see John Rich has just raised his hand for a question. Do you mind if I'll keep going through the panelists and then we'll come back to some of those questions at the end, and we'll keep moving through if that's good. So I guess, Karan, how are your operators coping? I mean, you guys as DQ, you're providing this information, you're trying to help them as much as possible. Generally, okay. I guess some struggling more than others.
Yes, that's what it is. I think some have managed to right-size their business and make the changes required to cope better in the domestic environment, but some have not. So we've got a mixed bag. With accommodation, there are some that are doing extremely well. And like same with activities, there are some that are doing extremely well, but some that are still struggling. A few weeks back, we had the Tourism New Zealand update here in Queenstown, and on the panelist, we had Matt from iFly, where he told us about his story. And that's like exceptional in terms of how well they are doing. It seems to be like a really good fit for the domestic market. They have changed their pricing structure, of course, but he said that their business now is better than it was before COVID. And it's an exceptional case where Matt said that his staff salaries now are higher than what it was pre-COVID. So there are exceptional cases like that, but overall it's fair to say that we are not coping well because the business levels are down to about 30 or 40% in terms of numbers, but in terms of value, probably even less.
Yeah. And I think this is probably a good time to segue into Michelle and our tourism strategist and the assistance. You give a lot of tourism businesses, Michelle, but how's things in Taupo today and with you?
Yeah, kia ora, Anna, and everybody on the line. Taupo's, we're about to get ready for a next deluge that's coming through to top up the gardens, but overall we're doing pretty well here. I think similar to what Karen was saying, there's almost two stories in Taupo, in that we're seeing that influx of visitors on the weekends. But yesterday I went into town at lunchtime and managed to get a car park right outside the cafe on the lakefront, which is pretty much unheard of year round here. So you certainly notice the quieter quieter times during the week. This is the time of year that we'd be gearing up for some of the big events that we hold here. So Cycle Challenge was meant to be on last weekend, and in a couple of weeks we were due to host the World Championships of Ironman. So obviously that's been cancelled, but we've been fortunate enough to secure that for 2022. So that is obviously something we've all been planning for, but haven't been able to host and deliver this year.
Yeah. And I heard, I can't remember who I was speaking to, but their team got together and still did the Cycle Challenge. There was, I think, a fair few teams that had booked their accommodation, went down anyway, just didn't have the formal event happening. So, that's good for the region.
Yes, I have to admit, I escaped to the Wairarapa last weekend for Toast Martinborough, which was cancelled. So we did a toast, not toast there. So similar to what a lot of the cyclists were doing here.
Yeah. Awesome. So I was listening to your podcast with Dylan last week, and I really liked your comment, or I can't remember if it's yours or Dylan's, but don't go dark on the international markets. What's your best advice to smaller tourism businesses at the moment? Should they be focusing part of their attention on planning and preparing for the return of the international markets?
Yeah, I think the best advice at the moment is there's a lot of overwhelm happening at the moment, particularly with the smaller businesses who don't necessarily have the resource available to them that some of the larger businesses have. So the first thing to do, and I'm guessing that a lot of businesses have already been through this process in the last 6 to 8 months, but just pull out your business strategy and really focus in on resetting your goals and your plans, and be realistic about what you can achieve at the moment, and don't get overwhelmed by the fact that you had all of these big plans prior to COVID happening and you're not able to deliver on those. So it's something, this is outside of all of our control. None of us obviously planned for this to happen. So that's obviously the first thing. In terms of planning for the return of international visitors, absolutely. And yeah, Dylan and I did have that chat, and I know Stephen England Hall raised it at the Rotorua Tourism Roadshow, just saying how long it takes, if you do go dark to recover and starting from scratch. But I think the big thing at the moment is there's so much change happening in all of the channels and with staffing, and it's really important that we just help keep brand New Zealand alive in the international markets, keep the inbounds and your offshore wholesalers up to date with what you're doing with your products. A lot of new products have come out of COVID. You've looked at that horrible word, but there are some new experiences that have been developed to target the domestic market. And so is this something that you think you'll offer to the international market in the future? Even little things, and one of the guys mentioned before, are you hibernating? Are you open? What are your plans? So when we do get that notice of borders opening, you've got up-to-date info in the market, because I guess we're used to only contracting annually in the past, but things are just changing so quickly at the moment. And the other part of that is just keeping your databases up to date, because when the borders do open, you want to be able to push out that most up-to-date information. And with staff changing, it'll be really hard to start from scratch if you haven't kept the databases up to date with who's in market and still working.
Yeah. And so well, you've given a wee list there, but what would your top 5 things be for suppliers to engage or contract with ITOs, particularly if they're targeting specific areas of personnel, some of these special interest versus the wider tourism product?
Yeah. Well, I think you gave some really good tips in your intro, which I think everybody should take the advice on that, Anna. But firstly, I think it's really important, and a lot of us have been going through this process, but really understanding who your target market is, because not every ITO will be a match for you. And so it's just, doing your research into, which ITOs are talking to the markets and the customers that you're trying to target, and building a relationship with them. obviously, as I mentioned before, keeping an eye on what's happening overseas. We will see a lot of change in how agents are booking. They might change their ITO, for example, or come through different channels just because of what's happening in market. I think the other really important thing that I am a little bit concerned about, and it's a bit of an elephant in the room, and you did allude to it, Anna, but it's the product and pricing strategy. And, there is a lot of discounting going on in market at the moment, and I understand why that is happening. But as you mentioned, Anna, it's very visible to the international market. So I would have a look at what you're offering and how you're packaging that up, because if you're offering exactly the same product at a much discounted price now, and then you're not able to give the ITOs a good excuse or reason why you can't offer them the same price. And it's not necessarily just about cost of sale, because obviously, it still costs you money to acquire customers direct as well. So just have a think about that. And don't forget your ITO partners. You guys are all still there. I think it's really easy just to get caught up in the here and now and what's happening in your business. And a lot of us have, downsized, and we're working with much smaller teams. And so you're driving buses and hosting tours, and you don't have that time, but it's making time to just check in with your inbound operators, see how they're doing. You guys I know how busy you still are, and how many quotes and inquiries are coming in, and how much demand there will be for New Zealand once we start opening back up again. So just check in with your inbound operators and see how they're doing, and see what you can do to help them as well.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Yeah, the pricing piece is really important, because it is the elephant in the room. It's that commission. I don't see that our offshore clients will change the way that works, because it works well. And so when you're pricing a product, you need to build in that commission if you want to work with ITOs in the international market. That's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging times ahead, because we're all going to be fighting for the consumer dollar. But I think as New Zealand Inc., we need to fight together to get them to New Zealand first. Is the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just going to switch to some of the questions that have come through. Andrew Aiken, g'day. You have asked, when the borders do reopen, what's everyone's expectations around how travel trends may change? Who wants to start with that one?
I can jump in. I think there's probably a couple of camps, right? Or maybe I should leave my personal opinion aside for a second. And I think that certainly the talk here in Asia in terms of travel trends, travel behavior, they're probably not new trends, but they're trends that have always been there. They've just kind of accelerated. There's going to be an increased focus, I think, on health and safety. There's going to be increased focus on what New Zealand's really good at in terms of manaakitanga, in terms of feeling welcomed, in terms of enjoying wide open spaces and our landscapes and our sceneries, and the fact that we are not a heavily populated nation. I think that there will be probably a tendency to travel in smaller groups. We might not see the large groups that we have seen in the past. And I think there will be also even more dependence on agents working through the travel agents. That purely for the fact of kind of reassurance, should something happen. I think probably premium will bounce back as well, because they're somewhat resilient, I think. But travel is going to bounce back, and whether those trends are significantly different to the past, they're not really. They're the same trends that have been there. They've just kind of accelerated. So that's sort of, and then my other sort of opinion really is that people will travel as soon as the borders open. People will travel, and we're certainly seeing that in some of the consumer research here, and also the research from the agents. People are prepared to travel within 3 to 6 months of any borders opening. There's a huge pent-up demand.
Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that? John, what do you reckon about travel trends that you haven't told me? You're on mute. I love saying that. You're on mute.
I don't think he's realised.
You should be able
well,
to unmute him, Anna, or Annette will be as the host.
Yeah, can you unmute, John? Yeah. Travel trends. What do you reckon, Aaron?
Well, look, you know, we've been discussing it with all of our partners, and something that we're kind of discussed, you know, throughout the various, you know, scenario planning at New Zealand is, you know, how do we get that balance right between if volume isn't there, and how do we, you know, make sure that we still retain yield and can compete, you know, make an O&D sustainable, you know. But similar to Stephen, I don't think the fundamentals are going to change. You know, how we're looking at is that maybe priority markets might change. You know, ones that we've looked at to really kind of lift volume might not be, you know, the first ones that are allowed back into the country. So then we have to kind of then relook at, you know, some of our second tiered sort of offline cities that we might be able to capture out of this region, and how do we start working in those a little bit more aggressively to kind of build up, you know, the volume that we need to make it. But it's a hard one, but it fundamentally, things we don't need to rewrite history or change things too dramatically. And to be honest, the trade don't want us to. They want to kind of get back to doing what they were doing as quickly as possible, because they want to make money.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I tend to agree. I mean, you know, I'm on the Tourism Futures Task Force advisory panel as well. And, you know, there is stuff to look at and stuff we can do better as a country. You can always do better. But generally, as you said, Stephen, we've got these open spaces, we've got this amazing scenery. You know, there's peak times of the year when Milford Sound is pretty revolting, but the rest of the time it's amazing. And, you know, there's things we can do. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there are major changes. I think the small group thing is going to be the starter. I think everyone's going to be cautious, and, you know, we're getting asked for the COVID policies of, you know, provide masks, provide hand sanitizer, provide this for groups coming in, and that's what's required in the rest of the world as they open up Europe. But we also suspect that as of probably, you know, day 2 of them being in New Zealand, the masks are discarded, except maybe on public transport. So, you know, it's a bit of a wait and see, I think. Yeah.
I think it's a really good point, Anna. Just that one on health and safety. I mean, New Zealand is perceived as a very safe and I guess health conscious nation right now, and that's part of the allure of New Zealand, is the fact that we don't have COVID in the community. You know, so whether New Zealand has to actually completely move towards what Singapore is doing, just in terms of our health and safety protocol, there's sort of some questions around that one. I mean, for us, wearing masks is part of our everyday life, but we have the same amount of community cases, which is 0, as New Zealand. So what will the traveller expect when they get to New Zealand? Will it be actually a welcome relief not to wear masks, or will it be an expectation? That's some of the questions that are bouncing around at the moment.
Yeah, totally. I've got a question from Susan Roberts. Hi, Stephen. Are you planning any virtual tourism workshops for your market?
Love to. Absolutely. Yes, we are, when the time is right. So at the moment, we've just done, obviously with TIA, in conjunction with TIA, a piece of global research where we have spoken to various agents around the world and also with the New Zealand industry to understand what situation, where they're currently at in terms of their business model. We'll use some of the findings of that research and our own research to decide which markets we will start to engage in, I guess, kind of business to business. Currently, we're already doing lots of virtual kind of tours of New Zealand with great support, as I said, from the New Zealand industry. But certainly there's an appetite in some of the markets here in Asia to have that business to business interaction with New Zealand very, very soon. We're certainly seeing it from here in Singapore. We're seeing it in Japan. So probably looking at the first half of next year, the first quarter maybe of next year, kicking something off.
Cool. Sounds good. Jeff Gabites, does land sell air, or with New Zealand, will air provide a push almost regardless of the status of land preparedness? So does land sell air, or does air sell land?
You know, I always say land sells air. If people don't want to go to the country and don't have knowledge of the programs, will they fly? But you know, there's another statement. You know, another part of that question was, if land isn't ready, will air hold off? Probably not, because as soon as borders are open and we're able to scale back, our intent is to scale very, very quickly. So we would like to think that everyone is kind of using this opportunity of this stood down time of quietness to really kind of redirect their businesses so that we are ready as soon as we're able, because we've been waiting almost since March. So the sooner we can all get back to doing what we're actually, you know, tasked to do, we're going to go.
And
can I jump on that one? Sorry, Anna.
Yeah, sure, please.
I also think just in terms of sustainability and repeat visitation, land absolutely needs to be ready as well. I think you're right, Aaron. I think people will travel when a flight opens, but in order for people to have an amazing experience in New Zealand and to come back again and to tell their friends and family, land needs to be ready as well.
And I mean, we won't be irresponsible with that either, you know. So we're, you know, at the height of, you know, our, late last year, we were flying up to, you know, 40 plus flights a week between Singapore and New Zealand across the alliance. When borders finally reopen, you know, what will that look like? Will we still have 3 flights a day into Auckland? Not likely. You know, it could be, you know, a bi-weekly service, but we don't actually know what that looks like yet, because we don't understand when we can fly, what the restraints on international flying will be like, if there needs to be social distancing on board an aircraft, and what that will, you know, potentially do to the economics of a flight. So it won't be just, you know, press go, but we'll do it sustainably and responsibly. And
then getting those planes out of storage, right?
Correct.
Yeah. One thing I know we're talking about at Tourism Export Council next week is the preparedness of hotels, because, you know, as an ITO, we're just getting through all the notices of the extended MIQ contracts into 2021. But if we are looking at potential borders opening in October and hotels can't give us inventory, that's a problem. So the land has to be ready. So, you know, that's something we're talking about next week as well. Question for John and Anna: where do you see hotel rates sitting, and what year, if any, considering past pricing cycles, would you say they mirror? Thanks, Richard Dodds. Well, I think, Richard, I mean, what we've been seeing, as I said earlier, is that 95% of our suppliers, including accommodation, have been rolling over rates. So we've been seeing what was issued for 2021 is being rolled to 21-22. And, you know, none of us want to go backwards in rates, and we've all got the laws coming in of the living wage versus the minimum wage, and business survivability. But it's going to be the balancing act then with keeping New Zealand priceable and of interest. You know, we say we're a premium destination, but we can't. We have to be mindful of that as when we come back from COVID. So that's probably a bit of a wishy-washy answer. We want as low rates as possible. I mean, really, come on. I think it's going to be more, though, about the flexibility and the terms for the clients. We're going to have to acknowledge that clients are nervous to travel, particularly long haul. I've got questions about them hubbing through somewhere in the first 6 months or a year of being open. So it might be the Asia and the shorter haul that opens up first. And so that flexibility of cancellations due to COVID or due to COVID resurgences, as opposed to I just don't want to travel anymore. But we're going to have to look at this flexibility and make things more flexible rather than more stringent. And that works for businesses as well, because we've all got to run a business. And we've got a question: what is the best way to get our product as an adventure tourism operator to inbound tour operators? Contact Annette. Lean back, Annette. Hi. first step is to go to Tourism Export Council website and look up all the inbound tour operators who are members and the contact person there, and you'll have your either a director or the product manager will be on that website. Go to your RTOs and ask for the inbound tour operators who they know who are working in your sector or your target markets, and just give us a call, email. I know sometimes in the past it can be difficult to get the cut through when we're all so busy, but just keep persisting and give us a call and drop us emails. And it's communications, and it's the funnel through all this and keeping in touch, really. Last one. What's the best way to share the information on product updates and hibernation situations with the various members of your team, Stephen? Through you, or are you able to share an update of your various office team leaders? So that's into market, I guess, from Sarah McDonald to go through to the in-market wholesalers. I mean, they can also come through ITOs and we'll put them out to our clients, but is it best
absolutely,
to come to you,
it could be that way, Anna. It could also be via our Wellington team, so our content team based in Wellington, product development team based in Wellington, and then they can disseminate and distribute it out into the market. I can follow up with some contact details on that one to Sarah directly. Okay, that'd be wonderful. I think that's all the questions we've got. Can I just say a huge, huge thank you to our 4 panelists, Michelle, Karan, Stephen, and Aaron. It's been a pleasure chatting with you guys today with these couple of hundred people in the background. Thank you so much for your insights and for supporting us with this first webinar we've done. Do you guys want to say anything to finish off, or all good? Kia kaha. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate the audience numbers. Tourism will bounce back. And we're going to do everything we can from the offshore market perspective to support you. So please keep us up to date with all of your product information, and we can help distribute that out to the relevant parties. So thanks very much. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We'll keep you posted on when we do the next one early in 2021. For those who I don't see or we don't see before Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas. For some of us, it's the perhaps first Christmas in many years because we're not so busy. For those of you who are busy, I hope you're busy and do well. And we look forward to catching up with you all soon. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much to our panelists, and kia kaha. Bye for now.